We're going to be discussing something important, and it is the 11 plus examinations. I know that some kids have recently done the exams. So I think it's a good time to reflect on the experiences from the past exams, but also previous exams, and also think going forward. What kinds of things should we be aware of as parents, as guardians, as carers to support children to excel in this area? So it is 11 plus examinations and the parents guide, and it's really a conversation for us to speak to each other, ask the questions that we have, the burning questions we have. We're using the meeting format on Zoom. So what that means is we don't have the dedicated Q&A function, but if at any point anyone has a question, feel free to raise hand and we'll invite you to speak. If you prefer to do so, you can also use the chat area and just type in your question and we'll pick that up and present to the panelists. Yeah. So we're really delighted that we've got our distinguished panelists here with us today. My name is Pedi Obani, Dr. Pedi Obani, and I support Afrikindness as a volunteer leading the parent team. We've got with us Sarah, Sarah Hayes. Welcome, Sarah, and thanks for being here. Sarah is a qualified primary school teacher. She's also head of primary and center manager at Lextra Learning, which is a tutoring service that provides maths, English, and science tuition for 11 plus exams. In addition to that, Sarah has a master's in education focusing on dyslexia. And of course, like she's just told us, she also does PE. So she's very well-rounded in terms of physical education, but also the other subject areas that are of importance for kids as they go through primary and think about going into high school. Thanks for being here, Sarah. We also have with us Rachel Lake. Rachel is a qualified and experienced teacher, as well as a tutor from award-winning tuition service called Love Literacy. And I just like the name. Rachel has over 15 years experience in education, having taught students from across primary and secondary key stages. And she's also experienced in preparations for the 11 plus examinations, which is why she's here with us today. She's passionate about helping young people to thrive. Thanks, Rachel, for being here. We have with us as well Chioma Fanawopo. Chioma is a Metro Featured Families expert and an award-winning teen and parent coach. She's been Forbes featured, and she's a mother of 2 boys. She doesn't look it, but she's got the experience of having seen kids through all the way to university. And in addition to her professional experience supporting families, she also specializes in supporting young people. And she's got over 18 years experience doing this. She's an educator, she's a well-being practitioner, and she focuses on positive mental health promotion for the entire family, both parents and children. Chioma mentors young adults and she serves as or has served as a school governor as well. She's a JNC qualified youth minister and a youth mental health first aider. Thanks a lot for being here, Chioma. And we have with us as well Sandra Ramsey Nicole. Sandra is a dynamic serial entrepreneur and she's a founder of a leading edtech company, which also specializes in 11 plus exams preparation. She's a dedicated mom of 2. She's also supported countless other children in successfully navigating the 11 plus process. In fact, she has a very deep passion for education and a commitment to empowering young minds. And she combines her entrepreneurial vision with hands-on expertise to help students achieve their academic goals and unlock their full potential. And really, thanks, Sandra, and our best wishes to you and your family at this time. So we're delighted to have all these panelists here with us today. We thank them once again for making the time and efforts to be here. And we really look forward to the conversations that we'll be having. Now, to give a bit of a context to this conversation today, a lot of the parents that we have in this webinar are either new to the UK educational system or have been in the system but are just getting to that stage where they have children in key stage 2. And so children who will very soon or very shortly be thinking about writing 11 plus exams. So the idea behind this conversation is really to have a clear picture about what to expect as a parent, but also how best to support the children through this important phase in their educational journey. Now, there's a lot of statistics out there about 11 plus exams and the performance of children. What we find is that some children from Black minority ethnic backgrounds do not seem to thrive as much or excel in the examinations, and perhaps do not even write as much or do not participate in the exams compared to children from other groups. And even when children do the exams, we all know that there's a lot of anxiety around exams, which again affects children and young people. So one of the things we want to do is to try and understand how best to support children through this process, young people through the process, so that it isn't a burden on them, but it's something that they can do and do comfortably, well, as much as possible when it comes to writing exams, right? Comfortably, but also having the skills that they need to excel in the process. And we also want to be able to equip parents with that basic understanding of what to expect and how best to support the children through the process of preparing for the 11 plus exams. To give a bit of context, in some countries, there are common entrance examinations which children write from primary school into secondary school. But in the UK, we don't necessarily have the common entrance exams. And I think in the previous webinar we talked about the GCSE exam. So there's a different academic structure here in the UK. So I think a good place to start is to understand what are the different types of secondary schools in the UK and how are they any different from each other? Because sometimes we hear people talk about independent, we hear people talk about grammar, we hear comprehensive, there are all sorts of names going around. So let's start with really understanding, where does all of this fit in? What do the different names of the schools mean? How are they different from each other? And where does the 11 plus exam come in? Now, I'll ask Chioma to start, but I'll say Rachel, Sarah, Sandra, feel free to wade in at any point because it's really just a conversation. Over to you, Chioma.
Can you hear me? Okay, I was muted. So apologies. Good evening, everyone. So thank you, Africanness, but also thank you, Dr. Paddy, as well for facilitating. So in the UK, the secondary school education system is that there are, I'll say, three types of schools. So the state school, which is also usually the comprehensive, so this is a school that is paid for by the government, so parents will not have to pay school fees. Majority of children in the UK tend to go to this kind of schools, and they usually have the national curriculum that is paid for by the government and that schools have to follow. Now, increasingly, a lot of schools have actually become trust. So you find that most schools are now part of an educational trust. It could be either a church school that is part of a trust, or it could be a regular secondary school. Now, we go on to comprehensive school. A comprehensive school is a name for a school that anyone can go to. So regardless of how well you do in an exam, it could be the nearest school down the road from you. So they will usually have a criteria in some cases, but everybody's taught together. And then in those schools, they're grouped based on sort of their performances. And they usually run, like I said, historically, they used to be run by the local educational authority and the local council, but increasingly more and more schools. I'll say most schools. Rachel, am I right that most schools are now in trust? If just thinking about, would you say that? Would you agree with me?
There's a lot of schools now that are, especially in London, there are a lot of schools that are in multi-academy trusts.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And that's that. And then you also have faith schools. So locally to us, we have a faith secondary school. Now, if it's a Catholic school, you need to be baptized Catholic to attend, and then a small percentage goes to others that are not Catholic. Or it could be an Anglican church, and in some areas, it could be a Muslim school as well. So these schools have a focus on particular religion, and they generally also follow the national curriculum, but they might have freedom in terms of when it comes to religion over what children are taught. Then you have grammar schools, and this is where children sit the common entrance exam, not common, 11 plus exam rather, So grammar schools are schools that children can go to from age of 11, which the government pays for. But they're different to comprehensive because they select their children using an exam known as the 11 plus. And children usually tend to sit it. They usually sit it the first term as they get into year 6. So most children, like Dr. Petty mentioned at the beginning, have just sat 11 plus. So these tests they involve things like maths, verbal reasoning, comprehension, creative writing, depending on the part of the country that you're in. Then there will also be things like non-verbal reasoning, also part of the element of it. And there used to be far more grammar schools in England and Wales, but in the 1960s, the government said that everybody should basically go to local schools and be taught in the same way. So that means that there are now fewer and fewer grammar schools, and that's the reason there's a lot of competition in terms of grammar schools. So in Wales and Scotland, they do not have grammar schools, but grammar schools still exist in England and Northern Ireland. And then you also have independent schools. So these schools are called private schools. The schools have more a say of how they run because they're not paid by the government, but the parents pay. So to go to most of the schools, you have to pay school fees, and those school fees are used to run the school. And usually they also have exams. So their exams are usually not long after the 11 plus. They usually take place sort of from October onwards and some in January. So they also have a process on how children get invited for interviews, tests, and just to ensure that they meet the criteria. And in some schools, they have bursaries, which children can have access to. Well, so that's schools in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Chioma. I think that's really helpful. And I'm hoping that the parents, if you have any questions on that, please feel free to put in the chat area. So we've got faith schools, we've got academies, grammar schools, independent, comprehensive, so much to pick from. And I'm not going to ask you which is better. I think each parent probably needs to go look in the area where they live, see what exists there, and try and understand, what are the benefits or advantages of each school compared to the other. And I think it's a good thing that we also have the Ofsted reports, at least for now, which give an indication, of some of the indices by which the government rates or ranks the schools. So that's something to look at. I know there's been a lot of controversy about whether the Ofsted report is any use or not. But I would say, as a parent, one of the things that I find really useful is that I'm able to go into the report. So I don't just go with the word good, improve, whatever it is, but I try to go into the details of the report and see the different elements of it that I think are important from the perspective of what my child needs in school. So I'd encourage every parent to try and do that as well, so that you understand the full range of schools and the possible benefits of each of them compared to the other. So thanks for that, Chioma. Now, the other question I have is, you've talked about the different types of schools, and I think you've made us understand that the 11 plus exam is really geared towards grammar schools, whereas for independent schools, it would be something else, so I guess each school would set their own exams. And I think the other really interesting thing you've mentioned is that the 11 plus exam happens in year 6. So the child needs to be ready, as it were, by the first term or by the start of year 6, and we're not waiting until the end of year 6 to get them ready. So thanks for that. Now, I know that the children also write the SATs in year 6. And so I'm curious to know, what's the difference between the SATs on the one hand and the 11 plus exams on the other hand? What do parents need to know about those two exams and how they run? Would Sarah or Rachel want to take this one?
Okay, I'm happy to talk about it, if that's all right. To speak from personal experience, I teach both. So I teach 11 plus, and I also am a year 6 teacher as well. And the differences are huge, but they're not at the same time. The one thing I always say to parents when it comes to the difference between the two, the 11 plus happens a lot earlier, and they have to know a lot of year 6 content in order to access the 11 plus. Using maths as an example, we wouldn't teach algebra, for example, to our year 6s until closer to the SATs. The SATs happen in May. It's a long way off yet. However, my cohort of kids that sat the 11 plus last week had to know algebra last week. So the difference is huge. Now, the SATs doesn't test writing. There isn't an official writing exam that's all assessed by teachers. However, some 11 pluses do involve creative writing. So that's another big difference as well. Again, same with non-verbal and verbal reasoning. Come up on the 11 plus. There is reasoning exams that happen for the SATs, but it's very different the way it's approached and the way it's explained. So there's lots of big differences between that. Hope I've covered that and that makes sense.
I think it does. Thank you. Does any other panelists want to add to that? I think you're muted, Rachel.
Oh, yeah. I would say as well, just in addition to what Sarah was saying about knowing, like, kind of beyond year 6 level, I also find that the 11 plus English as well, the text is more dense than the SATs text in reading. And so there's a lot more analysing. I think the vocabulary is much more broad. And also the SATs really does just kind of cover your knowledge of the national curriculum. So again, just to add to what Sarah was saying, you do, for the 11 plus, you do need to know beyond. I have actually seen questions in the 11 plus SATs that I've seen in GCSE Foundation, because I used to work in a secondary school, and I've seen some questions. And also I think the 11 plus also test for potential. So what it is that SATs will measure just your academic, your knowledge of what the national curriculum is. 11 plus also want to see that you can sort of handle what's coming. So it's like the CEM board that was developed by the University of Cambridge. And historically, they have been like the harder out of the two. There's two main ones, like GL assessment and CEM. And CEM are known to be harder because they're trying to differentiate between children who have had excessive tutoring, intense. So they make their questions a bit harder. And so, because obviously we know that sometimes when we are tutoring, sometimes, pupils do learn by repetition. And actually the CEM, I do believe actually CSSE is the harder one, but CEM have known to be harder as well, because they're just trying to make sure that pupils are not just learning by repetition, by rote learning, but they know their stuff. They've got the natural, and I'm just saying the natural, and I put that in air quotes, because actually I do believe practice makes perfect, but they want to see natural ability as well. But again, SATs is more to do with, do you know the national curriculum? And it also just measures the school's performance as well. So to see how well a school has taught the national curriculum.
No, I mean, thank you very much for that, Rachel. If I can hold on to that comments you made about, you mentioned GL, you mentioned CEM, you mentioned, what was the other one?
CSSE.
Oh, I passed the exam.
There's one for ISEB as well. They're coming up. They're coming up.
Yeah.
Boards, yeah.
So please, could you maybe just let us know a bit more what each of these means? And I think my understanding is certain schools pick which board they're aligned to. So could you tell us a bit more how that works?
Yeah, the two main exam boards are GL, which stands for Granada Learning, and then CEM, which is the Centre of Evaluation and Monitoring. They're just two of the main exam boards. There are others, but those are the ones that we've come across quite. And it's just like it's an exam board that kind of delivers the exams.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it advisable then that parents should, as well as searching through to know the schools in the area, should be thinking about, if there's a school they're interested in, then which board is that school sort of aligned with?
Absolutely, because different regions will subscribe to a different exam board. The GL assessments, they have quite a few
practice papers. I feel like the CEM, I believe they don't release exam papers, again, because they want to differentiate between those pupils who have had excessive and intense tutoring. But there are companies who have tried to put CEM style type questions together that you can pay for online.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Rachel. And also just to mention to our parents that the panelists have very kindly sent through some resources for 11 plus exam prep and just things we need to know. And we've put them up on the parent resource page where we can all access it. So would encourage you to also engage with that page and engage with the resources from each of the panelists as well. Thanks for that, Rachel, and thanks, Sarah. Very helpful. I mean, this is all interesting, but one of the questions to my mind, and I'm hoping some other parents are asking the same questions, is, Sandra, do you think this is suitable for every child? And can you tell us some of the misconceptions around 11 plus exams? Also, in your experience, some of the misconceptions around families, parents, and the ways in which that could have an impact on the child writing the exams?
Thank you. Thanks, Paddy. Thanks for having me on the panel. Just have a misconception, and I'll just explain a bit. My company, we run mock exams for children doing the 11 plus. So we've had experience in the past 14 years of doing the 11 plus. So we've had at least 55,000 children do our mock exams. So I'll just share a little bit. What we do find is one thing that's really common is a lot of parents just follow the crowd. They just do what other parents are doing. They hear, oh, my child's preparing for the 11 plus course, 11 plus, okay, I've got to put my child through. The first thing I'd like to say is the 11 plus is not for every child. If I was going to give you any advice, I would say study your child. Just get to understand what your child's strengths and weaknesses are. If your child's particularly bright, if your child's naturally really, really in the top sort of quarter of percentile in school, if a child really does really well, doesn't struggle in most subjects, they're ideally suited for grammar schools. If your child finds ordinary school challenging, I would strongly say that they're not what the grammar schools are looking for. And I'll be really honest with you, if you get in the London Borough of Sutton, for example, you have about 4,000 children that sit the 11 plus, and they whittle that down to 700 or 800, and only something like 420 actually get into grammar schools. So there's only a very small percentage, and that means that you're looking for the brightest children to get in. And what I find a little concerning is parents put their children through that. Obviously, all parents hope that the child get in. And I can see a room full of 100 children and only 20 of them will actually get into a grammar school. So assess your child, understand your child's strengths and weaknesses, and see if your child's suitable to actually pass and get in to the grammar school. On the other hand, there is also the argument for the fact that if you put your child through a grammar school preparation, so if you put the child through the 11 plus preparation and you get them to work really hard and be disciplined in getting up, doing the test papers and prepping, you also give them an advantage in terms of how well prepared they are for year 6. When they start year 6, they're much more prepared than children who don't sit the 11 plus. But so what I'd say to parents is, if you've got a child that's keen and really wants to do it, I would say put them through. But just understand that the selection criteria is really stiff. It's extremely competitive. So, for example, if we do a test, or let's say we do a mock test and we've got 100 children in the mock test, you may find that 20 children get 99%. Another 30 get 98, and some get 97, 96, and the school would only take the top 180 places. So you may find a child who actually gets 89%, and that child doesn't get into the school. The question to ask is, has the child failed? No. The schools just don't have enough places to accommodate every bright child. So approach 11 plus with try to understand if your child's really not cut out for it, your child's struggling at school, your child's not doing it. I would strongly say focus on getting them into other schools. Okay, but if your child is ready for it, is happy to do the work, put them through it, there'll be two benefits. One would be that they'd have a much better chance of succeeding in year 6 and year 7, or they will also get into grammar school. So that's my thought on that.
Thank you so much for that, Sandra. And I think I like the way you've put it in terms of, on the one hand, we need to understand the child. So it needs to be child-led, whatever decisions around the 11 plus exams, as against it being a fad or a trend, So it's not about the parents. It's not so much an achievement to say, oh, my child is writing the 11 plus exams. What it's really more about, is this suited for this child? Is this child in a good place to do this exam? And then the other thing you've mentioned, Sandra, is there's a benefit in letting them go through the preparatory process. So even if the ultimate goal isn't going to grammar school, maybe the goal is really to say, let's support this child's learning. And hopefully in the process of preparing for the exams, they're maybe fine-tuning if it's writing skills or reasoning skills or math skills, whatever it is, but let us support their learning. So ultimately it's about the child's best interest, and it's about their learning journey. And I think making it enjoyable for them as well through that process, because we don't want a situation where they do the exams, they're not happy doing it, and it maybe creates a block for them going forward, especially since the exams are happening in the term. So it's not like you're going to have summer to wash it off, So it's really important that it's a good experience for them, because they've still got 1 year of school to go through after the exam. So thanks for that, Sandra.
Welcome.
Does anyone else want to speak to that one, or shall I ask my next question? I've got lots of questions, as you can imagine. And thanks to all the panelists. I see that you're already picking up the questions in the chat area, so thanks for that. And to our parents, please feel free to send in the questions. You can use the chat area. If you want to speak up, you can also use the raise hand function and I'll call you to speak. I think, Sandra, there's a question here. Can we have a center in Leeds, please?
Okay. That's good. Yeah, yes, definitely. Be up for that. We've got quite a few centres if you go to Mock Test Masters. But yes, we'll be open to that. Yeah, certainly.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think you've talked us through some of the misconceptions around the exam, and you've also talked us through the importance of being really driven by the child's best interest. So that leads us nicely to the next bit around how can we ensure that the process is, how shall I say, is managed in such a way that the child is supported through it. Now, in the course of our conversation, we've already said we need to start early, right? If the exams are happening in year 6, first term, then we need to have started sooner. I know that generally people say, oh, start in year 4. So that's the easy answer. But I should also say some of us are here and maybe our kids are already past year 4. Some of them are before year 4. So if I can ask you, maybe Rachel, what do you think in terms of prep? You can tell us the best time, but what's the next best time if we've sort of missed that best time?
Okay, so yes, so generally we do, as from a tutor's perspective, we do say year 4 is a good age. If your child is in year 5, it's not too late. It really kind of depends on their foundational knowledge. So if you think that actually they've got really secure understanding of the year 5 curriculum, then actually we've got time to really build in. I mean, I guess if you're year 5 in the summer term and you're thinking, oh, they're not quite meeting some of the needs in the national curriculum or then it may be a bit difficult. But actually, if you're past year 4 and if you're in year 5 right now and, they are at expected level, then actually it's fine. absolutely fine. Yeah, so I don't think anyone can miss it. We will do our best. Okay, give it a go. And, if they've got a positive mindset, if, if they want a challenge, then let them go for it. Let them go for it. Just ensure that at home they're practicing, they're kind of like really learning at home as well. Because I think sometimes what happens, especially if parents are allowing tutors to tutor them, what happens is that they just kind of allow the tuition companies to kind of deal with it, and then they don't do anything at home. But actually what needs to happen is, we will do what we need, what we do best at the tutoring company, but actually at home they need to have a love of learning as well, making sure that they practice, making sure that they do their homework, making sure they are just really getting their grips into what is to be expected. But I don't think it's ever too late. Yeah, I don't think it's ever too late. So, but definitely year 4 will be the time that you would try and think. But even year 3, you can think about it. Year 3 is quite early, but I think you can think about it in year 3, especially if the school is saying, well, they're greater depth, like they're doing well, they're surpassing. You can start thinking, maybe this, maybe my child could do 11 plus. But year 4, I would definitely start thinking about putting into practice some of those 11 plus questions, what to expect. But if your child is in year 5, not a problem. Not a problem. We can do our best.
Thanks for that, Rachel. I like
That's
that
okay.
can-do spirit. Thank you. And I think I want to ask Sarah just to follow up on what Rachel has said. And I'm asking you because you've mentioned the fact that you do year 6 and you do the tutoring as well. So from a parent's perspective, I know one of the concerns sometimes is, oh, am I overloading this child? Is it too much? So how can parents achieve that balance? Do you think it's even feasible to be able to balance regular school work, and then the 11 plus exams? What's your practical advice on that?
So, in terms of practicality, what I always say, and I say this to every single parent all the time, little and often is far better than reams and reams and reams and reams of work. We generally say that, yes, start prepping in year 4, but the real prep comes in year 5 when they're a little bit more mature. It's in our experience anyway. But balancing the two can be really hard. I have had loads and loads of children who have sat the 11 plus so locally to us, which most of our kids go to, they sit the exam actually in the second week of September. And then I get parents go, oh, they're done now. And I go, they've got SAT still that they need to deal with. And it's a different exam that they have to focus on. It's a different set of skills. So what I always say in terms of balancing the two, little and often, be reading. If your child can read every single day and it's physically possible, physically make it possible. Even if the other things out there's quite so much. Because that will stand them in good stead for their SATs and their 11 plus. Then once your 11 plus prep finishes, that's when you can ramp up your SATs prep then. If you need to, then that happens. It's a long way from September to May. It's a long, long way. There is plenty of time. However, it is a lot balancing. And what I do say as well, from a parent's point of view, you don't just want your child spending the entire time work. There's sport, there's drama, there's all the other things that go alongside, and let them just be kids as well. Let them just enjoy being 10-year-olds, being 9-year-olds, because that's never going to happen again. I say to my parents all the time that come and drop off their kids, have they done that 10-15 minute task that I've set them? Do that twice a week over an hour sat there. They'll retain it a lot more. It's more manageable. It actually stays with them a lot better than trying to get one massive piece done. Hopefully that helps.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. And I think this is a recurring message as well that I hear from tutors, teachers, even, I mean, when I say teachers, I mean broadly, teachers in terms of school subjects, national curriculum, but also even things like instruments, like musical instruments. They always say 5 minutes a day, 3 days a week is better than 1 hour every other week or something, because it's that consistency, it's that practice, which really makes perfect. Like you say, practice makes perfect. So short, consistent, but regular, consistent is much better than this fire brigade approach, long sits, and it's not even sustainable anyway. If you keep a child for what, 1 hour, how many 1 hours can you fit in? So thanks. I think that's something really important that we can all take back as parents. Does someone want to add anything to that, or shall we? Okay. So I think the next thing is about, from a parent's perspective, and I'll ask Chioma this one. What are some of the common frustrations about the 11 plus exams, and what do you think parents can do about this? What practical advice can you give to parents?
Would you ask that question again, please?
So I was asking, what are some of the common frustrations that parents feel about the 11 plus exams? And what can you say about these and how parents can navigate? For instance, I've got my frustrations, to be honest. It's just too much out there. So what are some of those frustrations that you're aware of?
So is the frustration for the parents or for children?
For the parents. But you could also share from the children's perspective. I think that would be good to know as parents and how parents can support children through that. So either way is fine. And we'll ask all the panelists what they think.
I think some of the common frustrations are children don't want to study. There's too much hard work. Their tears, their tantrums. Oh, not again. I've just spent, like, I think it was Sarah that mentioned, the child has spent that hour already and they're like, I've done an hour. Can I go and play? So I think sometimes children don't appreciate the level of work that is required. And so it comes across as them not wanting to do it. And it's times like this that I say to my teenage children that you thank me later, but you might not appreciate it now, but you thank me later. But I think just that's one thing I found, that for a lot of parents and children alike, they were like, such hard work. I knew there were children that would cry, those that were not doing it, we're gonna, so that one thing. But as Sandra mentioned, that if a child is not cut out for it, then it's important to really pace. I would say pace that child, and little and often, like Sarah mentioned as well. So even if it's half an hour every day, is better than sort of 5 hours on a Saturday and Sunday. So I think that, pacing. So that's what I would say, the management of time. And then parents as well. For some parents, vet parents say it's a full-time job in some ways, especially the summer leading up to it. Like, I've known children that parents say no holidays because, you're not doing. But I would say, I would say balance though. Like, let them have something to look forward to, say the holiday that you've worked hard and we're still going to get away, but not to say no holidays because you're preparing for 11 plus. So that break can even help reset their way of thinking as well. So have I answered that question? I'm not even sure if I've answered it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing your perspective. Sandra, do you want to say something?
Yes, I'm just sort of thinking about the questions parents tend to ask, sort of frustrations I think they've communicated. One of them is quite like Chioma's just said, my child's not really interested. We've had children who come to our mock test and are absolutely petrified of walking into the exam hall. I mean, we've had children who've just refused blatantly to come into the exam hall. And I would say those children are not suited to a grammar school. They will have a lot of exams, a lot of tests, and they're absolutely not, they're just not ready for that. So that's one. The second thing is, I find a lot of parents say, but my child makes really silly mistakes. Because what happens is the child's doing the test papers at home, and when they get to an exam hall, they get something that's really simple, they get it wrong, and the parent's frustrated. Which is why I guess a lot of parents try to do several mock exams before the real exam. That's really just to give them a bit of practice. But what I would say is that remember, these children are only 10. They are 10 and they will forget even the simplest things. Now, I say to parents, just pace the children, encourage them, give them all the support you can, and hope that on the day they make the as little mistakes as possible. The mistakes are minimized because they will make those mistakes. So we're looking for the children who make the minimal mistakes on that day. So regardless of how they perform before going into the exam or what happens on the day is what really matters. They're only 10, and it does happen. It could be nerves, it could be, lots of different things, or they just forget. You do find that parents are, this is 11 plus is just a whole different ball game. You will find that there are parents who try to predict what's coming out in the exams. There are parents who memorize questions. There are parents who literally get other children to try to sit the exams. It's been known where parents have gotten older children to sit the 11 plus exams for their children. And then when the children do actually get into the grammar schools, the school wonders, how on earth did this child get in? And that's why you now find that the grammar schools are actually asking that any child who comes to sit the 11 plus must come with a photograph. And that's compared to the child who actually sits the exam before they come in. We've actually started asking parents to come with passport photos of their children with their passports, because we have 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds coming to sit the mock exams for 10, 11-year-olds. It is extremely competitive. So in terms of concerns for parents are desperate. Everyone wants their children in grammar schools, but please understand that not every child thrives in a grammar school. There are children in comprehensive schools who get 10 A stars. The most important factor that determines a child's success is parental influence. If you've got a child who doesn't get into grammar school, that goes into a standard comprehensive school, as long as they've got the right parental support, they will still excel. Getting into grammar school, I run a grammar school business, but I'm saying this, getting into grammar school is not the be all and end all. It's good if your child's suited to it. The last thing you want is to get into grammar school and your child struggles. Because believe me, if your child gets 70% in the paper in a grammar school, head teachers in some schools have been known to call the parent in and say, your child's not performing well with a 70% score. And some parents are finding that they also have to continue the tutoring to keep their child in a grammar school, because the child's naturally not in the top percentile. So please understand your child. Some children have been seriously damaged by parents just willy-nilly trying to get them into grammar schools when they're not suited for it. And some children just thrive. They go in there, they're competitive. I've got a niece, for example, she's first class grammar school child. She did go to grammar school. She reads every second. She's studying. She doesn't want to play. She's all studies. She's to do that. But if your child's not that way inclined, you can work with them to actually become a bit more studious, a bit more academic. You can do that, but do it with a bit of wisdom. Make sure that your child's also studying and having fun. There's no point sitting them through for 3 hours, giving them one test paper after the other, one after the other. 50-minute paper, they've done that. You've got to do the next 50-minute paper. I know you've got to do it's better to give them a 50-minute paper and then get them to go up and play a sport, have fun, do something different. Because by doing that, you stimulate the brain and they will perform better if they have a break. Simply giving them back to back. So parents who get really anxious and just think, oh, I've got to do this, or they listen to what other parents are saying, and their parents are saying, oh, my child's done 10 test papers and they got 90%. Focus on your child's journey. Don't compare your child with other children, and don't get down because what other children. In our tuition center, which we ran for several years, we have a child who consistently got sort of 60s, 70s, and we had other children who had 80s and 90s. And I remember saying to the parent, sometimes she performs well, sometimes she doesn't. But guess what? On the day, she nailed it. She did what was required and she got in. So just encourage your child as much as possible. Tell them that it's okay. If they do get in, fantastic. If they don't get in, it's great, because they will still excel in whatever they choose to do with you as a parent.
Thank you so much for that, Sandra. Rachel, Sarah, would you want to weigh in on this one as well?
No, I think you said it all. Just, I think it's really important to really be aware of your child's mental health because honestly, the 11 plus is intense. Grammar school is intense and it can have an effect on a child's mental health. So I think you just really need to be aware. And if you are preparing them for, as parents, if you're preparing them for 11 plus, make sure it's balanced with, maybe a game or reward, right, do half an hour of this and okay, you can get to play outside or you can, just so that it's not about, because it, like Sandra was saying, it's not the be all end all. I've seen children go to University of Cambridge or Oxford who's gone to a comprehensive school. So just be aware of the kind of intense pressure and what that can do to your child's mental health. Just to be aware of that.
Thank you, Rachel.
Just kind of add to that and that frustration and the mental health comment that Rachel made. It can be hugely detrimental on a child to be under so much pressure. I've currently got a young boy whose brother did the test with me 2-3 years ago. He's absolutely flying, was a standard 11 plus child. He was always going to get in. His brother struggled all the way through. I had multiple meetings with parents and I've spoken to them about maybe it's not the right thing. They pulled out right at the last minute and they made the decision it wasn't the right thing for him. And it's the best decision they've made for their little boy. So it can make a massive difference. I say to the families all the time, I'll work around what sports and things your child wants to do because it's important for them. It's important for their mental health. It's important that when I've got them and they're coming to me to do tuition, that they're in the right place to do that. They're not thinking, oh, I'm really tired. I've been sat here for 4 hours now. And then Sarah's going to make me sit for another 2. I tell them all the time, I play a lot of sport for my own mental health. I would not do anything that I would not expect them to be doing. And I'm a role model for them as much as, so yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for those. I mean, not to put parents off. This is really just almost like a reality check, to be sure that the decisions are informed decisions, which is why we do what we do with the parent team webinars, because we're saying these are big decisions parents and families have to make. But in making those decisions, we want to be sure that parents are equipped with the right information, with the right knowledge sources, with the resources that they need to not just make the decision in an informed way, but also have the resources you require to support the children through that process. And I guess that story Sarah told in the end for me is really, really important as well, because it sort of links up with what Sandra had said at the beginning when she said you could just do the 11 plus preparations also just to prepare the child overall, not necessarily because you want them to write the exams, but they could just prepare and it will put them in a better stead for year 6 anyway. But then the courage of the parents, Sarah, to have stepped back in the end to say, okay, well, yeah, hands up. It's not the right thing for us at this time for this child. And so let's do something else. I think that's really important. And so I'd like to encourage all the parents here as well to have that courage. Even if we have started out thinking we want to do this, but have the courage to do an honest self-assessment, looking at how the child is faring. So it's almost like I would say at every point, just check in with the child, check in with the tutor, because the other thing I've heard from all of you, Sandra, Rachel, Sarah, has been this idea of having conversations with the parents. So I think that's really important as well. And I would recommend as good practice that as parents, we check in the same way you would check with your school's, your child's class teacher in school. Yeah, to say, how's the child doing? Is everything okay? So check in with the tutor as well, just to see how they are progressing. And if it's time to make a big decision as to say, well, this isn't working, then I think let's have the courage to do that as well. Because in the end, like we said at the beginning, it's about the child's best interests. And those decisions need to be child-led, as against it being more or less a way of fulfilling our own, aspirations as parents. Now, having heard all of that, I think the next thing I would want us to consider is if a parent has said, well, this child seems to be doing well, they've got expected or greater depths in school so far, year 4, possibly year 3, year 4, and they say, well, sit with the child, ask if the child is interested in this. The child says yes, why not? Let's try. What can the parents do to support the child through that process? How can parents provide a supportive environment for the child at home to do the test, to do the prep, and to just make sure that they're having a well-balanced preparation towards the 11 plus exams? What are the practical things you would advise parents to do to support that process? Rachel.
So I would say to develop a culture of learning critical thinking and investigation from a very early age. I would invest in learning games, strategy games, and activities that require children to think outside the box. With my class at school, I do something called Thunks, which are kind of questions that don't have a right or wrong answer, but you have to really think about it. And that really helps with critical thinking. I would ensure that there's a library in your home that's got a variety of genres such as fiction, non-fiction, different text types like newspapers, magazine articles, books that deal with diary entries, so they can kind of get an idea of, you know, the different type of text types. I would also really recommend that your child has a desk. I know that sometimes, you know, children will do homework on the kitchen table or in the living room in front of the TV, but I would really recommend them sitting at a desk and just being in that learning environment. Maybe there's a timetables poster on the wall, you know, different, you know, punctuation and what they mean just around in their room. Go to museums, have discussions as a family or, you know, parent to child. Just watch documentaries and discuss. So it's not just about, right, sit down, let's do a paper, but actually just being really involved in all aspects. That's what I would suggest.
No, thank you so much for that, Rachel. I mean, just listening to you, it reminded me of the webinar we had some months ago on reading. So that one was titled Can't Read, Won't Read. And I'll encourage all the parents here to, we've got the recording on the site as well. Now, one of the things that I remember from that webinar was the panelists were saying reading can be anything and everything. It doesn't have to be a storybook. It could be a recipe. It could be a label. It could be just about anything at all. And sometimes it's easy to start with the things that the children are interested in. So if you've got a child who likes football, for instance, one of the things I did last Christmas was to get them books about football stars. So I found this book that was really a biography of various football players, you know, popular ones. And because for me, I just thought if they're interested in football, they would want to know about these people. So that would get them into that habit of reading. So it could be anything. And I think the beauty about it is there's a book about everything these days. Roblox, whatever the child is interested in, there is a book or a magazine or, you know, just find it and get them into that habit. The other thing I remember from that webinar, which I think is interesting, linked to what you've said, Rachel, was this idea of the library. I think it's brilliant. You've mentioned go to the museum. So just go out there. And in most places, you would have a local library. And chances are that that local library would have a range of genres, different learning materials, audiobooks, you know, all sorts of things. So as parents, we should also try and get into that habit of taking the kids to the library. And registration is free. So get the children registered in the library. For me, for my little kids, I think having the library card was like a trophy, you know. So make something big out of it. And most libraries, well, I shouldn't say most, but my local library has like a children's play area. So they've got these activity den kind of thing. So it makes the children even forget that it's a library. For them, it's just a place where they can do so many different things. So let's get into that habit of going to the library. I have a friend who goes to the library every Saturday with his kids. So it's part of their Saturday routine, so they just go shopping, go to the library, pick up some books, and before you know it, the kids are reading. And if they're going every week, then it means something is changing. They're being exposed to different books, different authors, different experiences. So I think that's something I've really picked up from that. Thanks, Rachel. So if you don't have the space for a library at home, then please, by all means, go to the public library and take advantage of the resources there. Who would like to go next in terms of how to build a supportive environment, adding to what Rachel has mentioned?
I think I'll go next. I think something that's quite helpful is having a quiet corner. So finding a space, so similar, building on what Rachel said, because if it's a busy household, there's TV in the background, all of that can be quite distracting. So adding to that thing about a table is actually just a quiet space. Is there space in a room, somewhere they could go, where they could actually have that this is our space and a clutter-free area, because those are the things that are ways to help them get ready. So is it clutter-free? Is it a conducive environment for the child to study? And I find that's really helpful as well. And the planning, so some form of a study diary, maybe half an hour every day, and maybe weekends we do an hour, 2 hours, something like that. So having a plan, because children love routine, they love structure. So when they know they have their tutor on a certain day, and then the rest of the times they have that time where this is our time to study and read, because children really love routine. So when they know this is when we're reading, this is when we're preparing for 11 plus, it makes that easier for them as well.
No, thanks for that, Chuma. And I think something that's also I remembered was this idea that children mimic a lot, isn't it? They just copy, right? So chances are that if you want to get them to read, then if you picked up something yourself, it just makes it easier for them to get into that habit. And the thing you mentioned about having a quiet corner, I think that's really important. And I know circumstances vary. So maybe some parents may be in a situation where they're thinking, well, I don't have that luxury of having a quiet corner somewhere, or the kids have to share a room, and so there's no space to fit in the table and things like that. But I think in the end, it has to be a communal effort, isn't it? So if it means, well, this is downtime in terms of this is a quiet time for everybody. So there's no TV, there's nothing else. So maybe that's something that parents could also try, so that if everyone is experiencing that quiet time together, they could be studying for their 11 plus exams, and then parents could be doing something else, but everybody sort of respects that time. And so there's no noise about if they can't have the luxury of going into a separate room by themselves for that period of study. So we can try and make a family quiet time out of it, and each sort of make the most of the time.
That wasn't at last.
So thank you very much for those. I think does anyone else want to add to the conversation how to create that enabling environment at home?
I'm happy to add. I think children look up to their parents as their very first role model. Yes, they look up to their teachers and see everything that they do. But if you're doing something, they will naturally look up and say, oh, okay. I've had, I'll use another example of a child that I've taught, a parent that was studying for a separate exam, and they used to sit down at the same time at the kitchen table, and they were studying for exam, and the child was studying for 11 plus exam, and that's the way they did it, because they looked up and saw what their child was doing and saw what their parent was doing. Talking about reading is the foundation of everything. If you're reading a book, obviously as long as it's a child friendly way of explaining it, but tell your child about the book that you're reading, because they'll naturally go, well, I'm reading this one, or can we go and find that book about football, can we go and find that thing. As a child myself, I read The Lord of the Rings. I wasn't allowed to read Lord of the Rings until my father had read them first. So it became a family book club. Because he read them, then I was allowed to read them. It's that what I do, you do sort of situation.
Thanks so much for that, Sarah. And I think it just reminds us of our role as parents, right? We've got to put in the work as well. Thanks for sharing that.
Sorry, can I?
Um,
Oh,
yes,
I'm
Rachel.
so sorry.
No, no, no.
I just wanted to just address a question that had in the chat, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Just about what games, because I think I've maybe spoken about games, and I would suggest, games like Sudoku and Scrabble, doing crosswords. There's a game that I used to play when I was younger called Taboo, where you had to guess a word without saying the obvious words, and that really helps to helps a child's language. So even board games like Articulate, I've got that downstairs, just really helps to kind of support language. So it might look like they're not learning, but they are. So Sudoku, crosswords, Scrabble, Taboo, Articulate, those games do help. I just wanted to say that.
No, thank you very much for that. That's very helpful. And the good thing about it is you could also play the games with them, isn't it? Because if it's something like a board game, then you could make a family thing out of it so that everyone sort of plays the games. We've also tried Monopoly. I don't know if that counts, but we've tried that as well. And I think for me, it was just useful to see how some people started thinking about money very differently, you know. So yeah, the games are very good ways of also learning and even bonding as a family as well. So thanks for sharing those snakes and ladders. I see snakes and ladders as well. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Sandra, I'd like to ask you, now I know we've talked about how to build this conducive environment and we've talked about the role of parents in the process. And we've also spent a lot of time talking about the fact that the 11 plus exams may or may not be suitable for every child. But I want to ask you particularly, in your experience, would you say that the 11 plus exams caters for children with additional needs or not?
It can do. It can do. The schools do make allowances for children with additional needs. What I would suggest is before you proceed with any prep for 11 plus, do your due diligence, find out the schools you're trying to get your child into in your local area, and find out what facilities they have for children with additional needs. That's always a very good start. And then obviously once they communicate that, you can then make an informed decision as to whether you'd like to proceed with having your child prepare for the exams or not. You do have the tutors who take into account children with diverse learning styles and diverse abilities who can work with them. Finding the right tutor is really important. Because I think most children who do 11 plus, most, not all, but most do get some form of get a tutor to prepare the child. So I'd say definitely look for the right tutor for your child so that you can actually just maximize the chances of actually passing the exam, and then find out what the schools do in terms of accommodating children with any additional needs. And then that way you could make a more informed decision, I'd say, yeah.
Thanks,
Okay.
Sandra. Just to pick up on that point you made about finding the right tutor. So assuming I'm a parent, I've got a child who's now in year 4 and I want to find the tutor, how do I go about finding the right one? Because there are lots of tutors out there and we're happy, for instance, we're now aware of Sarah's, and Sarah's based in Leeds, and then people have been asking about Sandra's, where are you based? Rachel, do you have online services? How can parents make that decision? How can parents tell that this is the right service for us?
Okay, there are several ways of locating a tutor. Some people talk to friends and say, do you know a tutor? And they recommend tutors. What I would say is, regardless of whoever recommends a tutor, whether you get a tutor from a friend or you get a tutor from a list on the website or from a website, it's important that with your first interaction with the tutor, obviously you do need to communicate, make the tutor understand your child's learning style, your child's ability. A good tutor would obviously ask you about your child's learning style or test your child to see how they learn best. There are tutors that are in there just for the money and they just churn them out in their droves. You want a tutor that
make sure that they communicate to your child in the way that your child learns. That's really important. So I would say definitely, if I was taking on a tutor, I would have a chat with them. If it does sound like they are the right person, I would like to perhaps sit in on one of the first sessions with their child. Obviously, talk to your child afterwards and find if the child's actually happy with the tutor, if they get on with that tutor or not, and if the tutor's happy with the child. Continue to take the child. It's quite important. So making sure you have the right tutor, a tutor that's supportive, a tutor that listens, and a tutor that adds value to your child, not just a tutor who just wants to build head every hour or every 2 hours, whatever it is, and they give you an invoice. You've got to make sure that there's some improvement and that the child's actually learning and enjoying the experience with that tutor. So it's more than just looking through a list. It's actually getting a bit more involved and making sure that you're privy to how the tutor learns, teaches your child, and how your child's learning by talking to them personally. Because what may work for another child may not necessarily work for your child. Okay.
Well, thanks for that, Sandra. And I think the point you make about understanding your child's learning style is really important. So it means that as parents, we need to go into that conversation with the tutor already understanding what the learning style is. And I would say that learning style could also change through a child's educational journey. You may very well find out that in year 1, the child was more, keen about pictures, but then you may find out as they get older, they're now more keen about audios. It could be anything at all. So I think as parents, we just need to be in touch with the children and how they learn so that we can then communicate that in the conversations with the tutor. So thanks, Sandra. Rachel, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say I agree totally with what Sandra was saying. And also you can ask for a trial, ask for a free trial. We at Love Literacy, we do offer a free trial because actually, like Sandra said, it's not always the right fit. And for us, we don't think we want your money. If we feel like actually we found that, it was a bit difficult, we would say like maybe, there's another tuition company down the road that might be well suited, because actually it's got to work for the child and for you as well. And we would say always have a tutor that is honest about your child's progress, because sometimes, parents want to hear that their child's doing brilliant, or their first lesson they did so well, but actually it might be that we might say that there's a lot of work to do. And parents know, like sometimes you'll get a school report that says that this person's working, below expectations. And then you go to a tuition company and say, oh, they did so brilliant, they got every answer right. But actually, there's a bit of a misfit there. But I definitely would say, the tutor, if they're honest about your child's progress and they say, well, actually, this child needs, your child needs a lot of work. I know sometimes it's hard to hear, but just kind of appreciate that the tutor is being honest, and ask for a free trial before you sign up as well. And I say that from experience. I know that some parents haven't brought their children to certain tuitions because we've said that actually this, your child does need to work. We can help, but just to know that there's a lot to do, but we are willing to do it. And actually they're like, oh, no, we don't like the sound of that. So, but yeah, so that's my 2 recommendations. Find a tutor that's going to be honest with you and ask for a free trial so that you're happy as well. Because we want you to be happy.
No, thank you very much for that, Rachel. And I think the point you also made about just being open to the feedback from the tutor as well, and not be defensive, because at the end of the day, it's really you wanting to give the child the support that they need.
Absolutely.
If you don't get the right feedback in terms of really understanding the baseline where they are, then chances are that you're not able to support them to move them to the next level where they need to be. So whatever feedback comes from the tutor isn't a critique, it's not a criticism, but instead it's really just a way of almost like a reality check, a way of understanding where are we, what do we need to do, and how do we get where we want to be. So I think that's another very important thing. And I like the fact you mentioned, Rachel, about even just seeing where things are in terms of the school's reports and the tutors. So if it's not adding up as a parent, then we shouldn't be overly excited, but instead we should start asking probing questions to be sure that that progress is real and it's not just, imagined, or it's not just someone being crafty to make it seem like the tutoring is working. So thanks for that, Rachel. Sarah?
Yeah, I will sort of very similar to Rachel's point. We, as tutors, we need to be open. If it works, if it's not working, it might not work for whatever reason. We need to be open with that, because actually, if we're not, and then parents aren't getting what they need, so it needs to go both ways. At Lextra, we always ask for school reports when a child signs up, so we can look at the child's report, we can talk to the parents, what the parent's saying, and what's happening in our assessment, and put the three things together and have that open discussion and say, right, this is what we're going to offer. Is it best that they're in an online class? Are they going to be better in a centre class? Do they need to be in a particular group because that group might be slightly smaller, or it might be better matched with a certain teacher? Obviously, part of my role is the fact that I am in charge of primary, and I end up having the classes sort of put together based on what the kids need rather than what their academic, their chronological year group, I should say. That's what works for our parents. That's what works for the company that we are in at the time. But it doesn't work for everyone. And it's having the confidence as a parent to actually say, thank you for everything. However, have you got any recommendations? Because I don't think it's going to work. Because it happens. It does happen.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah. I think that's it's key. So that's idea that we all need to be honest. The tutors need to be honest with the parents, but the parents also need to be honest with the tutors, and also in their assessment of the child's needs and the kind of support that the child would require from them at home, but also from the tutors. Thanks a lot for that. I think it's been a very useful discussion. For me, I've learned a lot. And I think it's also sort of reminded me of the ways in which supporting children to be successful in exams, it starts from yesterday. And even this idea that reading is the basis for everything. So as we go forward, and we think about the 11 plus exams, whether it's time or not, whatever stage a child is in, I think those basic things around trying to encourage that learning culture, trying to encourage reading at home remain true, trying to encourage even curiosity, allowing the child question. So when you tell the child, do this, and they say, why, mommy, don't take it as a challenge to your authority, but just take it as, okay, this child is learning to be curious, they're learning to be critical, and try to support them through that process, because I think it's a very thin line. I mean, I teach at the university, and sometimes it's interesting when people send in answers to questions and you're saying, oh, yes, but why? You need to go a step further. It's not enough to say, this is what I've seen or this is what I've read. What do you think about what you've seen and what you read? And I think in children, it starts really early when they start to ask those questions of parents. And when they want to know, why are you asking me to do this and not the other? And I remember how they say, even with babies, you show them two things and say, which do you want? So it's already that early stage of helping the child find their voice, helping them engage with questioning, of course, in a way that is guided, and ultimately that also supports their learning. So these are all important things we can already start trying to support children with before the 11 plus exams, for those who have younger children. And even for those who do not have younger children, if you see children around you being curious, asking questions, why do you want me to do this? I think this is another reminder for us to understand that this is part of their learning process. So it's not about them being stubborn, or unruly, but it's really part of the learning process, and we want to support them through it, whether as the responsible adult in the environment where they find themselves, or as their carers or parents or guardians, whatever role we find ourselves in. So thanks a lot for that. We've had a lot of questions in the chat area, and I think very kindly our panelists have been going through the questions and answering them. Before I go back to the panelists for the final closing thoughts, we've had lots of links put in the chat area linking up to the resources which we have on the parents page, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But do we have any other questions from the audience? Does anyone have any questions that have not been answered, or does anyone want to use the mic to ask the questions directly? I think there was something about a page, suggestions about online pages to register, not tuition. Is there a website to practice? And I think we have lextralearning.com, and then we've got a few more, bond11plus.co.uk, mock test masters, Atom Learning. Yeah, so those are all examples. Priska, do you have a question? Yes, please. Are you able to unmute, or do you want to type the question?
Yes, I'm able to speak.
Yes, we can hear you.
Please, is any of the tutors up there with you? Anyone in Birmingham, Warsaw precisely?
Okay. So Priska's asking, thanks for that, Priska. Do we have any tutor in Birmingham, in Warsaw precisely?
I think what I would say is that Love Literacy is online. So I don't know if you wanted a sort of in-person one, Priska, but Love Literacy online. And I think Let's Learning their leads. So none of us, but Love Literacy is online. And as Rachel mentioned, they do trial session. You can do a trial session with Love Literacy.
Yeah, Lextra officially our centre is in Leeds. However, we are online as well if anyone would be interested in online. But the centre is officially in Leeds.
Thank you for that. Rachel, did you want to say something?
Oh no, I was just gonna kind of reiterate that we are online, so you can connect from anywhere, and that's Love Literacy, and we have our own learning platform. So homework you can put online. We write reports twice a year. We give regular feedback. We do run boosters, but obviously that's not going to help because we are in East London. But we provide homework feedback. So even though you might not be face to face, we do a lot online. So.
Okay. Excellent. I think that's the beauty of having the internet these days, and online learning platforms. So you can either connect with the tutors in person, or you can connect with them online. And we've got links already in the chat area. So you can, as a start, Priska, check each of those links and try to see what could work for you, depending on where you are. And you would have the contact details for each of these panelists and their various services. So you can contact them directly and then take the conversation forward as needed. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay. I'm just asking, yes, my son did an assessment yesterday, but I'm just asking because I can see you all talk about knowing our children's feelings. Okay, thank you very much. I think maybe, and that's a good point, Priska, thanks for raising that. And I think that would be the closing for me. I'll put this question to the panelists. How can parents manage post-exam? What kind of support should parents be providing to children post 11 plus exams, considering, like we said before, that once they do the exams, they're still in term, they're still going to school and all of that. How can parents manage that? And in the event that the result isn't as expected, what advice would you give to parents to just make sure that there's no adverse impact on the child's learning? I think that could be a good way to close. Who would like to go first? Sandra?
Okay. I would say after the exam, celebrate your child. It's no mean feat preparing for the 11 plus at the age of 10. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of pressure, both on especially on the child, but also on the parent. Just celebrate your child regardless. They've actually put in all the hard work. Chances that they could get in, they may not get in. Just reassure them that whichever way it goes, you still love them, you're still there for them, and they're still going to be super successful, whichever path they take. That's one thing that I think really you must do. And if they do get in, fantastic. And if they don't get in, reassure them. There's nothing more defeating than sort of feeling that, oh no, you're not good enough. You obviously don't want the child feeling that they're not capable, because you could hamper their progress in year 6 and year 7 if you don't celebrate them regardless of the outcome.
Thanks for that, Sandra. Rachel?
No, I agree. I second that. Definitely celebrate them and just let them know it's not and I think Sandra might have mentioned that in the beginning, it's not the be all end all. And they have other talents. It could be sports. They might be really good at science, so just to kind of celebrate their other gifts as well. Just let them know it's okay. It's okay.
Thank you, Rachel. Sarah?
I think it is really important to have some sort of celebration after, but if the result isn't what you expect it to be, having that conversation. And at this time of the year, when year 6s are starting to go and look at high schools, not just looking at the one grammar school, the entrance exam that you have to go sit, make sure your child has gone and seen the other school they might go to, the other comprehensive school, and having that conversation and say, well, if it goes well, this is where we'll go. If it doesn't go well, we've still got this amazing option. Because they can feel very closed off, like, oh no, it's not gone so well. That thing's closed off to me now. And having that conversation earlier so that they know, oh, okay, it's not the be all and end all. It's not the end of the road. And keeping them going for the SATs. Yes, let them have a little bit break, but then they've still got a long way to go in year 6. There's a lot that they have to get done. But yeah, lovely.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah. Chioma?
I think a few things to add is, just like everybody said, I think definitely celebrate, but I think also parents can then explore other options like independent schools and what bursaries they offer. Because in some cases you do find some schools might offer that. But also another thing I would say is, if the child, sorry, I had one thing and I just lost the I've just forgotten one last thing I was going to say. But I think I think that definitely celebration, and that even though they might not have done as well as they had hoped, they're still amazing. They're still wonderful, and they still have a bright future ahead of them. But yeah, I can't remember the last thing, but the other thing I would say about checking out other schools like independent schools and prep schools. Oh yeah, that's the thing. I just come back. That grammar schools, they can also they also have 13 plus. So I'll recommend that as well, because it's something that sometimes a child might move areas, so places might come up, but parents shouldn't lose hope if they still want to try for 13 plus. But that happens, I think, year 7 or year 8, I can't remember, but they can still try it for that, or look at, like I mentioned, schools and independent schools as well. Thank you.
Oh no, thank you very much. And then I think you've thrown us another one, 13 plus exams. So perhaps that's something for parents to be aware of, especially if we have parents, for instance, whose kids are already in year 7, so they've gone past the 11 plus stage. So there's still, the option of maybe looking into the 13 plus exams and seeing if that's something that's available wherever you may be in terms of the schools around you. So celebrate the child, whatever the outcome. And I think I really like the point you made. Most of you said that about looking beyond the grammar schools in the area, but, just taking the natural step of going around, looking at the various schools, having conversations with your child about the schools. Because the thing about it is there's no guarantee. even with the comprehensive schools, there's no guarantee that the first school you want would be the one you get. And I think as parents, we have that responsibility to prepare the child mentally. And so it means that even if you weren't looking at a grammar school, you were looking at a comprehensive, you want to prepare that child to be able to be robust enough for whatever decision the council makes or the school makes, in terms of whether they get in or not, so that whichever school they get, they don't feel like it's second choice or it's not exactly what they wanted. So try and prepare them to be open-minded and to be receptive, to whatever comes through, whether with the 11 plus exams or with the comprehensive schools. So I think that's something really important. Thank you so much, every one of you. I think it's been a very enlightening conversation. Thanks to our panelists. Thanks to our parents for being here. We've got a survey, which you can already see the QR code on the screen. If you could please scan and just leave us your feedback on the webinar. It's really important to us because it helps us with our programming and preparations for future events as well. Thank you so much for that. The other thing I'll mention is all of these links that we've seen in the chat area, our panelists have already kindly sent this through in advance, most of them, and you'll find them under the Parents Resource page on our website. Here's a QR code which you can scan. It will take you straight to that page, and we also have the link there. So you'll find the mock test papers, all the sample questions, all the preparatory resources that the panelists have shared with us, you will find on the website. The other thing I'll like to mention is an ongoing research that we're conducting at AfriKindness. This research is really a short survey, about 5-7 minutes. And the idea is to try and provide the evidence that's needed to support African children in the UK. The research is focused on understanding how Black African children can be supported with their racial identities at home and within the community. So would like to hear from you in terms of your experiences. It's a very simple survey. It's very short, and we hope that you can all go in there and leave your feedback. You can go through the QR code, and you also have the URL on the screen, just to be sure that we're capturing as much as we can the voices of all of you to inform the research outcomes. And the other thing I'd like to mention is that we're in October, and one of the flagship events for AfriKindness is the Africa Awareness Week, which holds from the 7th to the 13th of October. So we've got a lineup of events, and we'd like for you to register for us to together celebrate the African identity and also the spirit of communal oneness, which Africans are known for. And this is open to everybody. So it's not just a case of it's only Africans celebrating, but it's a celebration that requires all of us, all hands on deck, to celebrate the Black History Month and the identity of Africans. The other thing I'll mention is that in October still, I had to think about it because it just occurred to me that tomorrow we step into October. So in October still, we have our next parent team webinar, which is really around effective communication for teens. And we'll have a guest speaker, Angela Karanja, who's a world-renowned adolescent psychologist and parenting teenagers expert. So if you have teenagers, but even if you don't have teenagers, if you're getting there, then it's never too early to learn. So come along and hear from the experts around how to effectively communicate with teenagers so that you're able to build a relationship of trust, a relationship of mutual respect, and a relationship that's able to support your child through the various phases of their lives into adulthood. The QR code is there. You can already register for the event, and we hope that we will have all of you back with us on the 24th of October. And if you haven't already, please do follow us on our social media handles. AfriKindness is on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're very sociable and would like to connect with you on all of those platforms. You can also send us an email to info@afrikindness.org, and you can follow us on our website, all the information that's there. Thank you so much for being here. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Special thanks to Sandra, Rachel, Chioma, Sarah. It's been really lovely speaking with all of you. Thank you for your time. And to our parents, I would say good luck. Parenting is a journey, and every day comes with its own. But whatever you do, just be sure that you've done your best, and whatever comes out of it, just know that you've done your best and be led by the child's best interest as well. Thank you for your time and really have a lovely rest of your evening.